It goes without saying that problem solving is the most important process of game design, as no matter how much conceptual fluff a game has, if problems aren't solved, the game is nothing more than a hollow clone of a pre-established formula. While there are formulas out there that are great, such as Painkiller's formula, it is important to notice that the series began to deteriorate in later entries, and this was because the later entries were mods that ended up becoming fully fledged games. But these mods were fan-made projects that were amateur, and while Overdose did have a lot of great conceptual fluff, it was still lacking in comparison to the original game. The point is that it takes more than just great ideas and concepts to make a game. And I feel that many game developers nowadays do not know this, as they merely wish to create their own fantasy. And while I do understand the burning desire to do that, it is important to remember that these are commercial products that people are buying. The conceptual fluff means nothing if the game itself is a reskin of a pre-established formula. Game developers nowadays tend to be looking to make games that function similarly to games in the past to cater to people's nostalgia. But why would you play these games when you could just play the original work that these games are based on? You cannot replicate nostalgia. It is impossible. You can only create something new that can eventually bring about nostalgia in the long run. Now let's talk about problem solving and how game developers should do it. Now at first it may seem like common sense to just come up with the most pragmatic solution, and while that may be a good start, it doesn't bring about anything interesting or exciting. Adding something simple like a dodge button doesn't inherently make a game more compelling, it just allows players to avoid attacks in an effective manner. What does make a game more compelling, however, is Urban Reign's more complex evasion system, where each body part has its own evasive maneuver that you have to input to protect that specific body part. This is more interesting and more involving than a basic dodge roll that merely propels you in a direction with iframes. Another example is God Hand, which has a similar system where you have sidesteps, backflips, and an upper body evasion. How about Devil May Cry, where you have backflips, dodge rolls, dashes, aerial dashes, wall running, and of course a stationary dodge? Of course, dodging isn't all there is to video games, as there is also the necessity for a lock-on feature, a means of allowing players to conveniently place the camera in a position that allows them to see what they need to see, and in a beat-em-up, this is usually an enemy. So a lock-on is needed. It is common to see the camera focus buttons and targeting cursors in most beat-em-ups, but Chaos Legion decided that instead of a targeting cursor that makes absolutely no sense in the game's world, instead of cluttering the UI with gaming nonsense, how about we give the player the ability to shoot lightning at enemies, which acts as a cursor that allows Sieg to lock onto the enemy inflicted by the lightning effect with the camera focus button. This design decision was implemented to solve what could have been a very complicated problem. How do the legions focus on a target if you, the player, are not focusing on it and want to crowd control? With the lock-on lightning, this is no longer a problem. Not only that, but it looks cool as hell. Another more recent form of problem solving is Duma in Star Ocean: The Divine Force. Duma is not only a plot device, but it is also a problem solving machine. Rather than solving all of the problems in numerous different ways, they invented this machine to combine all of the solutions into a singular entity that ties in with the game's world, much like the Lightning in Chaos Legion. Nearly every mechanic in the game revolves around Duma in some way, and this not only rewards players for utilising the game's mechanics by building up Duma's VA gauge, but it also feels contextually interesting as well. Instead of running towards an enemy, why not fly towards them with a VA attack using Duma? Instead of tanking an enemy's attack, why not use Duma's barrier or a well-timed dodge to give Duma more VA gauge for a longer barrier and longer blindside stun? Duma not only brings about solutions, but it brings about new concepts, and it does all of this simultaneously. Put simply, if you're going to solve problems, solve them in style. Kill two birds with one stone. Never go with the simple, boring solution. Innovate and do something nobody dares do, because that's what will ultimately make your game stand out and separate it from the rest.